Yes, so we've spent the time when we do our healings, we've spent some time actually looking at what happens in the heart and the brain, because the altruistic act, the act of giving, is something that's innate in us when we're not living in survival, when we're not living in fear, we're not living in stress. When we're not living in anger or frustration or hostility or resentment or impatience or prejudice or whatever those emotions are that cause us to become aroused and alarmed in an emergency state, those emotions actually divide us as a community. They cause us to focus more on ourselves and less on community. And I don't think that, science and psychology has always called them normal human states of consciousness. I call them altered states of consciousness because when we're in stress, we're out of balance, and people spend a lot of their time in physiological imbalance. But that's not our true nature. Our true nature as a species is actually to cooperate, to collaborate, to connect, to commune. And when you get people in this state where they have an opportunity to give, and it's altruistic, and they actually want nothing material or don't want to be compensated anyway, but it was just the act of giving. When we give something, we actually increase our oxytocin levels. That's the side effect of giving. That oxytocin makes us feel more love. We open our heart, and oxytocin signals another chemical called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide signals another chemical to cause the arteries, the muscular lining around the arteries to the heart and in the heart and lungs to actually dilate and to expand. So we get this energy, we get this fullness in our heart from giving. And it is that act of giving that causes us to connect and to work together in community. And I think we're wired in so many ways to be that way. So when we get people together and we ask them to give life to another's life or to love another person into life, we train them to do this, and then we measure the effects between the heart and the brain. And when a person starts the process and they can really elevate their state and really move into that elevated emotion, the heart starts to beat in this really beautiful cadence, and we've seen this hundreds of times on brain scans and heart scans. The moment that happens, the heart in its rhythm begins to, and through the vagus nerve, send information to the brain. And there's this love affair that starts to take place between the heart and the brain. And the brain starts moving into these altered states of alpha. And of course, as you know, that state of alpha is a creative state. It's when we're less preoccupied with the environment. We're not analyzing or thinking about our body. The chatter that we hear in our head, the voice that's always talking to us, that default is kind of shut down. And we start to see in pictures and images, and we start suppressing our analytical mind, our thinking mind, our neocortex. We see this happen so many times. The person's heart actually fills with a very low frequency that actually looks like it increases as they do this. And here's the payoff. The parasympathetic nervous system kind of rises during this 15 or 20 minute period, which means now the body's moving into a state of relaxation. It's moving into that state of balance. But then all of a sudden we see this suppression in the parasympathetic nervous system, and all of a sudden we see this rising of the sympathetic nervous system. And there's a cadence that starts to take place between the heart and the brain where there starts to get to be a lot of order. There starts to be waves starting to carry waves, and we start to see this energy start to build in the brain. And much like a Buddhist monk, the person is completely relaxed and very awake. And they move into these beautiful, beautiful gamma brainwave patterns that is an arousal. And that arousal that they're feeling is not the arousal that they feel from fear when they're in survival, not anger when they're in survival, or frustration or pain. That's the arousal that typically happens that stimulates that sympathetic nervous system. This arousal tends to be more like ecstasy. This tends to be more like bliss. This tends to be more like love or connection. They feel really connected to something really amazing, and they're so relaxed and awake. They're so present and in the moment that somehow there's a door that opens in that elegant moment where information through the form of energy somehow informs matter in this wonderful way. And the cool part about it is it doesn't matter what you eat. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter where you're born. It doesn't even matter if you're sick or healthy, that when this occurs, the person who's doing this no longer feels like they need anything. There's a wholeness that takes place that all of a sudden the person is no longer in lack or separation. They feel as if the connection that they're experiencing actually in that moment is having some type of effect, and that changes the outcomes dramatically. So if you can get a collective network of people with brain and heart coherence, we're learning that it's not the number of people or the amount of energy that's going to produce the most dramatic effects. It's the group that's the most coherent, that sends the strongest signal, that somehow collectively causes random events to become less random and more intentional. And there are some effects that are taking place in the three-dimensional world that we experience with our senses called matter. And the side effect is an upgrade in the person who's receiving the healing. But by the same means, many times the person who's administering the healing is actually having some type of biological change going on as well. And that's the cool part about it, because the celebration of what we just did in community then causes us to open our hearts a little bit more. We could actually get better at this the more we practice it. And I think that's important, because any skill is something that you practice over and over again. Sure. And we've kind of played with this in our research, and it's really interesting because we use these very sophisticated random event generators in our room, in a ballroom. And a random event generator is like a coin toss, and this particular machine tosses a coin about 1,000 times in 1 second. So the more you toss a coin, the more it's going to be 50-50. So the random outcome of a coin toss is pretty much 50% heads, 50% tails. The more you do it, the more it kind of levels out. And what we discovered when we do our healings in groups, that the change in the random event generator is so clinically significant outside of normal that it suggests that random events are now becoming less random and more intentional. Now, the effect of that, of course, is a person's the people that are actually administering the healing with intention. They have to activate their energy to such a degree that when they give energy, the act of giving is the act of receiving. That person who's actually giving is giving something of themselves, and pro-social networks in the brain actually turn on for us to bond, to move closer together, to commune, to work as a collective. And the person who is receiving that energy, somehow there's a door that opens where they start to notice a change in their biology. And we see changes in inflammation and pain. We see changes in insomnia, like you, changes in all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Now, what's the significance of that? To me, it's the 4-minute mile. People who now all of a sudden witness that or are part of another person's healing. Let's just use that as an example. The feedback that the people that were in the Power of 8 group that helped to heal this person from cancer, that experience, knowing on some level that they contributed to that person's health, there's a level of empathy, a level of compassion that happens in the people that are administering it, where they can actually celebrate that person's healing. And the celebration of doing something for another person, when we receive the gratitude from that, that has the most profound effect of healing on the person who's actually doing the healing as well, because the experience, that new experience, is producing an emotion that is outside the known emotions that we typically feel. This level of joy, this level of empathy causes us for our hearts to open up more, which actually makes us better at doing it if we keep administering it. So I think that once that happens and it's a possibility that becomes a reality, consciousness is an awareness, and awareness is noticing and paying attention. The tribe, the collective now, is aware of another possibility. And that's so important in this time, that maybe there's more to reality than we know. And the effects that are being produced right now with so many people doing work like this is causing people to break from the conditioning of that they need something outside of them to change their internal state. Maybe we have all the biological and neurological machinery to do it, independent of something outside of us. And I think you and I both share that desire to demystify that process.